everybody. This is Congressman Mike Levin, and thank you for joining us once again for another virtual town hall. We've got a lot to cover this week, and we've got a fantastic special guest, my colleague, Congressman Karen Bass. It is great to see Karen here with us. Over the last few months, of course, the American people have gotten to know Karen quite a bit better, and she was very, very deservedly on a short list of candidates to be our vice presidential nominee. And I think the country really got to know Karen the way that we know Karen in Congress. And I remember just a few weeks ago when we were on the floor together, I mentioned I was enjoying reading all these great stories about her. And I was enjoying them perhaps more than she was. But overall, the American people have gotten introduced to just a great colleague and a real leader in the House Democratic Caucus and in the House of Representatives. Karen grew up in Los Angeles, and her activism made her a California State Assembly seat opened up. And from there, she became the first African-American woman to lead a state assembly as Speaker of the California State Assembly, and then was elected to Congress in 2011. She rapidly rose in influence among members of the Congressional Black Caucus and was elected to lead the group in 2018. Karen's background in activism and in social justice has been particularly important as the country continues to grapple with racial inequality in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and most recently, of course, the tragic events in Wisconsin and the shooting of Jacob Blake. Karen was elevated to the national stage earlier this summer when she authored the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And of course, with millions of Americans across the country demanding accountability and comprehensive reform to a system that has allowed injustice against people of color for generations, the Justice and Policing Act can finally help us bring about the long overdue changes that we need. As a proud co-sponsor of this legislation, many steps we can take towards a more just system that ensures that George Floyd and so many others are not forgotten. Another thing to know about Karen is that she's probably one of the most well-liked and well-respected members of Congress, both on the Democratic side, but just as importantly on the Republican side of the aisle. And a big reason is because of her collaborative style, something that I have tried to learn from and emulate. And as she recently told NPR, it's team-driven, it's never personality-driven. So Congresswoman Bass, thank you so much for joining us for our town hall today. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate to be with you again.
Absolutely. And before we turn it over to Representative Bass and start answering your questions, and I thank all of our constituents for sending those in, I want to dive a little deeper into the civil unrest we're seeing across the country right now. The past few days and weeks and really months have been challenging. It's been a disheartening time where we're seeing people throughout the country speak out and confront the racial inequality and the systematic injustice that permeates our society. Largely peaceful protests in response to Blake and the killing of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd have been a part of our healing process, and I unequivocally stand with peaceful demonstrators across. Important to note that I don't think any of us support the individuals who are taking advantage of the situation to commit violent or criminal acts. Protesting, that's illegal and we condemn it. Violence and deadly shootings have no place in our cities. And the individuals who commit criminal acts, and it's being done on not any particular side of the ideological spectrum, all of those must be held accountable who are committing criminal acts. We can't allow those individuals to define and change the narrative of one of the most overwhelmingly peaceful movements we've seen for the bulk of the summer, and we can't allow the president to further divide us as he continues to fan the flames of hate and encourage violence. We are all Americans. Republicans, Democrats, we're all Americans, and whether you stand on the left or the right, any loss of life is a tragedy. And as these demonstrations continue, again, largely peacefully, I also recognize that we need to focus on listening showing compassion and trying to understand what it means to be black or brown in America, something that I will never know. And as I work to do that, my heart breaks for the families of countless innocent Americans who have been killed as a result of unnecessary violence. Thoughts and prayers are never enough. We need action. We need real reforms at every level of government to address the systematic racial injustice throughout our society, particularly in the criminal justice system. We need new laws to strengthen transparency and accountability in law enforcement. We need to ban unnecessary and excessive uses of force, including chokeholds. We need to end the militarization of local police departments. And my great hope is in the days, weeks, and months ahead, our communities will heal, and that we can use this opportunity to whatever extent possible to make real progress in our country. And I hope we can do so with compassion rather than aggression, together as one people in one nation. And no one's been more important in this fight in Congress than Karen Bass. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Chairwoman Bass, to make some introductory remarks.
Well, absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on again. Be here with your constituents. One of these days, I'll look forward to seeing people in person. I can't wait.
Absolutely.
So that is. Zoom is helpful, but I prefer the human contact. I want to be brief because I want to get to people's questions. Let me just say that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act really is a transformative piece of legislation that would allow us to hold police officers accountable when they do wrong, but also support them to raise their standards, to make sure that there's national standards and accreditation and training that actually supports police departments. Because in our country, we have 18,000 police departments, and the standards are all over the place. There are no national standards, and there isn't an accreditation process. We also provide grants to communities to begin to re-envision public safety in a particular community. I'll stop there, and let's just see what questions people have, because I'm sure I will discuss other parts of the legislation through the Q&A.
We have a bunch, Karen. Before we get to the questions, a quick update on COVID-19. As we do each and every one of these town halls, we've done scores of these town halls since March to try to inform our constituents with the most recent information, public health recommendations, and so forth. And very sadly, we've passed 185,000 deaths from COVID-19, just a stunning statistic. And the United States now has about 6.1 million cases, the most in the world. California, unfortunately, has the most cases of any state in the country, with approaching 717,000, a little over 13,000 deaths. San Diego County has confirmed 38,871 cases, 688 deaths in San Diego County. Orange County, 48,825 cases and 1,007 deaths, just crossed 1,000 deaths in Orange County, very tragically. Of course, we know that Governor Newsom last week announced what he is calling the blueprint for a safer economy. This is a new evaluation or metric system that really uses two metrics to determine a county's progress in reopening. The first metric is the number of daily new cases per 100,000 residents, and the second metric is the positivity rate. There are four color tiers. Purple is the worst. That's widespread. And then red is the second worst. That's substantial. And most of the populated areas in California are in the purple, although San Diego County, as I'll mention in a second, is in the red. The metrics are as follows. To get out of purple and into red, you have to have a case rate between 4 and 7, or less than 7 really, per 100,000, and you have to have a positivity rate of less than 8%. San Diego County is in the red, as I mentioned. That's the substantial tier. They have 5.8 cases currently per 100,000 and a positivity rate of 3.7%. So they're the only big county, well-populated county in California as of now that is in the red. And in this situation, red is not good, but it's better than purple. What that means is that a lot of different businesses are reopening. Some of them are at 50%, some of them are at 25%, some of them are at 10%. you can go online to a completely new, revamped covid19.ca.gov, and you can basically type in where you are, and you can get a list of all the different businesses that are open in your community in terms of the categories and the percentages, and it's actually a very helpful resource. Orange County remains in the purple. That's the most restrictive tier. And this is interesting because just before this new blueprint was announced, Orange County had actually gotten off of the watch list, and they had been off only for a few days. And so they are basically making progress very quickly towards being in the red, assuming that the metrics stay where they are. Orange County is expected to go to the red on September the 8th. And then there's a 2-week period before schools can potentially reopen in person. So a lot of the public schools in Orange County are looking at September 22nd, potentially as a reopening date. But the numbers have to stay in that lower category for that period in order for that to happen. So as I've said now, I feel like for months and months, the better we follow all those public health guidelines, the better shot we'll have. I'm sure Karen agrees with that in LA County as well. And that means wear your mask, socially distance, only do those activities that you have to do. And let's just look out for one another and exercise common sense and try to stay healthy and safe. Now, well over 3 months ago, I think it's probably 3.5 months ago, the House passed the HEROES Act, comprehensive plan to crush the virus with testing, tracing, and treatment, put money in the pockets of the American people. Mitch McConnell in the Senate, they insisted on a pause, and now they are working on a proposal which unfortunately appears woefully inadequate, somewhere on the $500 to $700 billion level. Our proposal initially was 3.4, I think, trillion, and now we've said that we will meet them at 2.2 trillion, and I'm hopeful that will happen because we only have, I think, Karen, about three legislative weeks in September left, and we have to fund the government and we have to come to a deal on COVID relief. So obviously, we all want to see that happen. We recognize the gravity of the situation, the inadequacy of the president's recent executive orders, and now is no time for us to take our foot off the gas. This is really an unparalleled health and economic crisis that we haven't seen in our lifetimes, and we need to be up to the challenge to meet the moment with the resources that are going to save lives and livelihoods in the months ahead. The last thing I'll mention is the U.S. Postal Service. I have been signaling the alarm about the USPS and the lack of funding for many months. We led a bipartisan letter several months ago on this. I think 137 of my colleagues and I asking for the $25 billion lifeline was included in the HEROES Act. And then, of course, we've seen Louis DeJoy in the testimony before the House and the Senate. I have said it before, I am particularly looking at this through the lens of our veterans and the prescriptions they're not getting, because that's what we hear. Veterans are used to getting their VA prescriptions in 3 to 5 days. Now it is taking weeks at a time, simply unacceptable. And also 100,000, give or take 100,000 veterans work at the U.S. Postal Service out of the 630,000 employees. So this is huge. For Karen's knowledge, our district has the second most veterans of any in the United States. So we hear you. We're doing everything we can to fight for that funding for the USPS, to get it on solid financial footing through COVID-19. And then we're going to have to work long term to correct course, because Congress back in 2007, under George W. Bush, signing into law some things that hurt the post office very badly, now is running huge deficits. So we've got to get that back on track. And we've got to, again, respect the Constitution. The Postal Service actually predates the U.S. Constitution, if you can believe that. So we have to do everything we can to make sure we save the USPS. We passed the Delivering for America Act. I think it was two Saturdays ago now. We flew back, we voted, and we passed that. $25 billion. We got, I think, 26 Republicans on that bill with us, which is a pretty big deal. And we sent that to McConnell, and of course, he's sitting on that. So I hope they take action because we've got to protect democracy, we've got to protect lives, and we're going to do everything we can to fight for that. So now let me get to our questions, and we're going to start with an easy question, Karen. Well, maybe it's not that easy, but at least it's a short question. Deborah in San Juan Capistrano asked, why won't Republicans support the Justice in Policing Act. Karen, what do you think? The question is, why won't more Republicans, or any Republicans, support the Justice in Policing Act?
Let me just speak on behalf of my Republican colleagues and say that 3 Republicans did support the bill, and that's no small matter because Trump had tweeted 2 days before demanding that no Republicans support the bill, and they went ahead and they did so anyway. Let me also tell you that throughout the debate and after the bill passed, a number of our Republican colleagues that Mike and I are with every day, well, that we were in session, expressed their interest in wanting to do something, and we have met multiple times, and they actually came together and gave new language to Tim Scott, because again, we've already done our work in the House. It's the Senate that has to act. So we are hoping that Senator Scott will come forward with a new bill, a better bill than the one he originally did. And if they pass it in the Senate, then we can go to conference where you actually begin negotiation. So that's where we are now. I remain hopeful that it might happen. There's always these times when we do come together and they tend not to be really acknowledged. So 3 Republicans, or like Representative Levin said, 26 Republicans voted in favor of the post office bill.
Well, I know also that the Senate, I think on a bipartisan basis, rejected Senator Scott's bill.
Yes.
There were Republicans and Democrats both against it. So hopefully they can pass something on their side. And then, as you said, naively, Karen, before I got to Congress, I thought that's actually how it worked, where, we did more things in Congress. And I hope that we get back to that. It sounds like before Mitch McConnell, there used to be a lot more of that. Nicholas in Oceanside, he has a similar question. He says, it doesn't seem like the Justice and Policing Act is going to become law anytime soon. What should we do to push for change in law enforcement in the meantime? Oh, and you're on mute there, Karen.
Actually, one of the things that's really good, because there's been so many peaceful protests, and like Mike, of course, I would never support violence. And this situation is weird that's happening right now because we don't really know where all this violence is coming from. But anyway, because of all of that protest, though, that is really what led to us being able to do the bill to begin with. But when you have these kind of situations, when there's so much attention, there was a rippling effect. And so a lot of states passed laws, local entities passed laws. So there's nothing holding you back from your local area examining these issues. And one thing that I always tell people is that, because this is indicative of policing around the country, examine your own police department. Ask them about their data, their demographic data. Ask them about their police stops. Ask them about their arrest record. Ask them about the racial breakdown. And you will find that these issues exist regardless of where you are talking about. It's not only in minority communities, but minorities are in all communities. And you will find that you have the same situation. So you might examine the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and look and see what might be applicable on your local level.
Exactly right. And, in California, we've already gone further than most places with regard to things like use of force. And Dr. Shirley Weber's been such a great leader on that. But I sat down with a number of our local law enforcement leaders in recent months, and I think they're a lot more open-minded, candidly, in some of our areas in San Diego County and to an extent Orange County than perhaps some other places. But who you elect on the local level is really, really important. And so who your county supervisors are, who your city council members are, who your elected county sheriff is, those are all critically important pieces. And as we continue to fight for that fundamental change in Washington at the federal level, keep fighting on the state and the local level. Sean in Imperial Beach asks, what are your thoughts on ensuring that citizens in general are safe from excessive use of force from police officers? How will education on proper use of deadly force be implemented into law enforcement officers' training? Oh, and you're on mute again. There you go.
That is one of the issues that can easily be addressed when we have the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, because it calls for national standards and national accreditation. It is kind of shocking that as powerful as law enforcement is, that there are no national standards. There's no accreditation. And so it can be addressed in that. And that's why we have in some departments a chokehold is legal, in other departments it isn't. We're all over the map. And there needs to be the national standards.
Here's another one for you, Karen. Why don't you support some, and we can both answer this one. This is from William. Why don't you support some action against the violence and looting taking place across the country, or are you only interested in attacking the police? And you see, Karen, we make sure that the tough questions get asked as well.
Absolutely, and it's the tough ones that are the ones we absolutely need to pay attention to. Well, I can say on behalf of your congressman and we do not support lawlessness. It makes me crazy when I see that happen, because the peaceful protests are very important. But when they break down and when people start vandalizing property, when they start committing violent acts, that is just completely unacceptable. And if you commit a crime, you commit a crime. But I will tell you, though, the inequity in the system is also what is maddening. So when you had that 17-year-old walking in the middle of the street with his AR-15 on his chest, he's walking toward the police. They give him water and send him on his way. He had killed 2 people, wounded a 3rd. Now, if that had been a black man or a black woman walking down the middle of the street toward police with an AR-15 on them, he or she would have taken about 3 steps before they would have had 20, 30, 40 gunshots directed at them. So it's that inequity that also creates the anger that leads to the protest, but it is never acceptable for that anger to become violent, period.
Very well said, Karen. And, I agree that violence and looting, that is not protesting, that is just breaking the law and needs to be prosecuted. And look, we, I think, are fully capable of calling out to the extent that there is inequity in the law enforcement system. We're capable of calling that out while also acknowledging that law enforcement professionals, these are our neighbors, our community members, and I personally know many people in law enforcement, and they do a remarkably difficult and good job each and every day. I've tried to bring together to whatever extent I can in our community civil rights leaders with law enforcement leaders. And we've had a number of very productive conversations discussing how we can continue to improve. I think we're doing a lot better, as I mentioned, than a lot of places here in our district, but I think we can continue to do better still. And I'm committed to that. And, at the end of the day, I think law enforcement has to be part of the solution here. And I know that Karen is committed to that as well. And honored to continue those discussions and hopefully be a bridge builder, again, between the civil rights community and the law enforcement community here in our district. Here's a good one from Bill, Karen. This is a great question. Bill asks, what has happened to civil debate in politics? Why is everyone who does not support Democratic Party positions classified as a racist, and those not supporting Republican positions branded as an anarchist? Why don't you all focus on the 90% of good people in the middle and stop being so divisive? Wow.
Well, you know what? I think that we actually do exactly what you're suggesting. The problem is, though, is that you can't really get the news media to cover. Just like I mentioned, we've been having all of these bipartisan meetings. I know that there is the perception that we all hate each other and all we do is fight and all of that. But I think Mike and I will admit there's a little bit of theater going on sometimes on both sides of the aisle.
Yep.
People are performing for the cameras, and then afterwards we're all buddy-buddy. So we do have differences. I kind of compare it to sports teams where you fight like heck when you're on the court, and then after the court you're, collegial. And so I do think that we do far more of that. And I wish one of these days that the news would actually cover the work that we do together that is bipartisan.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I do a lot of bipartisan work on the Veterans Affairs Committee, where I chair a subcommittee, as well as our Natural Resources Committee. We've gotten a lot of things done there around conservation. That doesn't get reported nearly as often as the controversial stuff. And I really think when you break down kind of the dynamic of cable news, whether you're talking about MSNBC, CNN, and kind of that ecosystem, or you're talking about the Fox News ecosystem, often it seems like two different worlds that we're living in, and two different areas where we're getting our information. And then you compound that with the way social media works, where, if you click on a story on Facebook, you're going to get more stories supporting that viewpoint. So it's this kind of self-fulfilling, bubble. And at the end of the day, that leads to further and further polarization. And I think most people would be surprised just how many good friends we do have across the aisle, how many good conversations we have on a day-to-day basis, at least when we're there physically, when we're able to connect with one another, as we hopefully will get back to doing in September. But I've been very thrilled, actually, with the amount of bipartisan progress we've been able to make in the committees that I serve. And again, on my subcommittee, we've got 10 bipartisan bills that have passed the House. Now, 4 of them have been signed into law by this president to help our veterans, as an example. So, I think it's not as bad as is frequently reported. It's not perfect. And I think Karen's exactly right. I think there is a certain amount of theatrics that go on as well. But I'm always amazed, there are in Washington, there are show horses and workhorses. And sometimes these show horses get all the oxygen, and the workhorses are in the back actually getting all the legislation through. And so I think focus on what we do as much as what we say. Even on COVID, look at the first 4 bills that we passed, the CARES Act and the other 3 bills. Those were collectively around $3 trillion. Those were all bipartisan in nature. Now, we had to fiercely negotiate them, but at the end of the day, bipartisan and for the good of the American people. And that's where we're hoping to get with this 5th bill that we've been apart for the last couple of months. But we'll get there. We need to get there for the good of the country. Drew in Oceanside, here's another good one. Will there be oversight to make sure the Postal Services return to full service by restoring all removed mailboxes and sorting machines before the election? And I know, Karen, that DeJoy says he won't do it. He won't
Exactly.
put it back.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
it's the challenge that we've had with this administration, and what we've all learned is that there's not much we can do about it. They can openly violate the law, and we're kind of left there. So I think what this administration has done over the last 3.5 years has really made us examine the checks and balances in our system. And so we will provide oversight, but we're not even sure if we call somebody to come testify, they'll show up.
And I know there's a subpoena now out for DeJoy with some certain information that we didn't get that we asked for. One thing I will say for our local audience is that I had a chance to speak with some of the leadership in our district for USPS, which includes San Diego, Imperial, Riverside, and San Bernardino. I'm also going to be hopefully connecting with the folks that do Orange County. And I asked them some very tough questions. Why was it taking so much longer for these veterans to get their prescriptions? Can they confidently tell me that people that put their ballot in the mail in accordance with California law will have their vote counted on time? And I was mostly encouraged by the answers. It's going to require some additional follow-up, but the basic gist of it was that a lot of the blue collection boxes and sorting machines that were removed, a lot of that had been in the works prior to DeJoy's arrival, and is part of the changing nature of the USPS, and how a lot more of what they do is parcels and a lot less of what they do is letters. And they still have a lot more work to do to actually ramp up parcel sorting machines. They told me that they had the resources that they needed in our district to do that. nonetheless, I expressed my grave disappointment and frustration with the late deliveries of those medications for our veterans. And I also brought up the letter that the USPS sent to our Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, and they sent it to, I think, a total of 46 Secretaries of State, basically saying they couldn't guarantee that ballots will be delivered to the registrar's office on time, even if they're dropped off in accordance with the state law. Of course, in California, you can postmark it on the day of the election, and it will still count in that in the subsequent days as the final ballots are counted. They confirmed to me that they have absolute confidence that California law will be met, and that they can meet the demands of the ballots that'll be filled out. And look, in a pandemic, you shouldn't have to choose between your health and your vote. Simple as that. And that's all we've said all along, and that's what we'll keep fighting for. Here is another one. This is very related. This is from Joanne in Carlsbad. What can you and us citizens do to make sure our mail-in ballots are counted? Karen, you have any thoughts on that? You have a lot of people in LA County that are counting on being able to vote and not getting sick at some polling place with any kind of unnecessary danger due to COVID.
Well, I think a couple of things. One, in terms of the actual polling places, I think we all need to appeal to the young people in our community to ask them if they would help staff the polling places, because typically polling places are staffed by seniors. And it's the seniors that do not need to staff the polling places this time because they're at higher risk for COVID complications. But I think the most important thing that people can do is fill that ballot out and send it in early. Don't hold onto that ballot and send it in at the end of October. Now, we're fortunate. We don't really have to worry about in our areas active voter suppression. I don't want to be naive about it, because actually parts of your area did have problems a few years ago where they posted police officers at polling places to scare Latino voters. So I am hoping that this won't happen this time, but I do think that our solution has to be to mail in your ballots early, and to get young people to staff the in-person polling places.
Well, Karen, my birthday is October 20, and I hope that everybody votes and gets their ballot in by my birthday. It's also, I think, important to know that October 5th is when they can start collecting our ballots. In other words, we can drop them off, and every county is going to do it a little differently. In Orange County, the registrar, Neil Kelly, has actually done an outstanding job, and they've adopted the voter choice, I think it was called, where what they're going to do is in the 5 days before the election, they're going to have the polling centers open, the voting centers open. They're also going to have the yellow drop boxes pretty much all throughout Orange County, where you can drop your ballot off really throughout the month of October. You have about a month to do it. And you can also put it in USPS if you want to. But I expect a lot more people in Orange County are going to use those drop-off boxes. They were secure last time. They worked very well in March. I think we had like 150,000 people that used them in March. And so I expect a lot more of that given everything that we're hearing and seeing with regard to USPS. But October 5th, it'll be here before you know it. And I agree with Karen. If you can work at a polling place, please do it if you're physically able to do it. San Diego County, so I don't leave them out, they're going to have what they call super polling centers that are open in the 4 days leading up to the elections, basically Halloween through November the 3rd. And they're also going to be announcing their drop-off locations. I'm not sure if they're going to do the libraries as they normally would, or have other drop-off locations. But they're going to have a list of all those places in the middle of September. So the idea, I think, in California, and it's great that we've got Secretary Padilla, who has really championed this, is that if you are legally eligible to vote, we want to make it easier for you to vote. We don't want to suppress. We don't want to disenfranchise. We want to make sure that your voice is heard. And I'm very proud of the way that the elections have been conducted here. Here's another one. And I know, Karen, you have to go in a minute, so we'll have to wrap up with this one for you. Stephanie in Carlsbad says, I am a small business owner, and I want to know when talks will resume on helping us out through the next months of the pandemic. Well, the PPP and other loans and grants were a godsend. As you know, since you, along with your other colleagues in the House, passed an additional bill back in May, we need more support so I can keep my staff through the disastrous federal pandemic response. Karen, you want to talk about small business?
Well, absolutely, and I can't agree with you more. And let me just say on behalf of your congressman, both of us apologize to you for you not getting the assistance you need. But we also want you to know that we did the work. We passed the bill. The assistance is there. It is just sitting on McConnell's desk. And for the life of me, and Mike, I don't know if you have any more insight in this, but for the life of me, I can't understand the biggest roadblock to getting the HEROES bill passed, which has the assistance for small businesses in it, is because our Republican Senate colleagues are objecting to resources to state and local government. And right. I don't understand that, since they all represent state and local government. I don't understand how they get away with it. They objected to that, and they also objected to the $600 a week supplement to unemployment, because they believe that that's so much money that people are not going to work. Now, in LA and Orange County, we know that's not a lot of money. Maybe if you come from a very small town, some other place, $600 a week is a lot of money, but that doesn't pay anybody's rent in Southern California. And so your representative and I will be there every moment trying to get this bill passed. And I'm so sorry that you're having to suffer, because it really and truly is unnecessary. We did the work over 100 days ago.
Well, Karen said it extremely well. You know, all I would add is that I think we are going to have more aid for small business. There was still $138 billion in the PPP program that was unspent, that was not allocated, not lent. We had initially had, I think, $350 billion. Then we passed another initially we had 320. We passed another 350. This is a $670 billion program, but $138 billion was never allocated. So I think we're going to definitely do more for small business, and I know that that's a very bipartisan initiative as well. Now, Karen, you're going to have to go in a minute, but I would love to hear from you, your closing thoughts on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, what we need to do to get that bill over the finish line, and I'm with you every step of the way, and I hope we can do it in September.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's always an honor to be with you and your constituents, so I appreciate you inviting me again. And we're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep doing everything we can. If any of your constituents feel like it, they should pick up the phone and call Tim Scott. Give him some love. This is not a criticism. Say that we love the work he's doing, and we're looking forward to him putting a new bill on the Senate floor so that we can begin to negotiate. Again, just like the HEROES Act, the House did its work. We need the Senate to move. So I am hoping that we'll be able to do that. In the meantime, I'm sure that Representative Levin can give you the information about what is in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and look and see what you can do on a local level, because many of those provisions can also be passed in a local city or a local county, impacting your law enforcement officers where you live. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Karen. Just know how much we appreciate you. We thank you for all you do, and I'll see you, I think, in a couple weeks. Unless we come up with a deal, then I'll see you before. Thanks, Karen. Well, we've got a few more questions here, and I want to make sure we get to all of our questions with the time that we have left. Cliff asks, what can be done to join global leadership in climate responsibility? Is it left only to the White House, or can Congress initiate some actions? Well, Cliff, thank you for that outstanding question. I am proud of what we have done in the 116th Congress, and specifically in the House with our climate action plan. If you go to climatecrisis.house.gov, again, climatecrisis.house.gov, you can see the plan that we put together. I'm honored to be on the select committee. There are 9 Democratic members on the committee. There are 3 Californians on the committee and 3 freshmen on the committee. And it is a 530 plus page report that really is commensurate with the science. It outlines pretty much every area. There's 12 pillars of the report. It outlines every area of what needs to be done and really has the details, and is backed by science, and is backed by also good economic policy, because a lot of times we hear about the cost of doing these things, but we don't often hear about the costs of doing nothing and sticking with the fossil fuel industry. But it will save a tremendous amount of money in the long run if we accelerate the transition to sustainability. Now, in terms of our global leadership, I can tell you that I went to Madrid last year as part of the delegation to the UN Climate Change Conference. And we are set to go back as soon as this pandemic is over. We're set to go back to Glasgow, Scotland. I think it's now going to be in 2021. And I'll either be going back as part of a new era in American politics and with the new administration, where we recommit to building that coalition with the rest of the world. And it's so important that America demonstrates its global leadership. We are the second highest emitting state or emitting country of any in the world. China is number 1 with about 28% of global emissions. We're number 2 with about 14%. India is number 3 with 7%. And Russia is number 4 with 4%. But I would submit to you that the United States is the only country in the world that has the political might, and hopefully we still have the respect of the world in a manner that can compel the rest of the world to take action to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint as well. I measure also what we do in this country with regard to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and accelerating the transition to sustainability on the basis of followership. Followership, meaning what we do needs to lead to other countries following suit. This is a concept embraced by my friend David Victor at UC San Diego. He's really championed that concept. So I'm always looking at the initiatives that we take in the United States through the lens of whether other countries will follow suit. Now, if President Trump wins re-election, then we'll be going to Glasgow. You know, hopefully, still will be welcome in terms of the congressional delegation. I think we will be, but it will be with a very different set of principles from the administration. In fact, when we went to Spain, the Trump administration really was focused on the export of liquefied natural gas rather than on trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it actually is one of the huge differences between these two candidates, between President Trump and Vice President Biden, with regard to climate policy and specifically with regard to global leadership on climate change. Here's one from Julia. She asks, what are your thoughts on the Director of National Intelligence's cancellation of election security briefings for Congress? Well, I think it was an abdication of his responsibility. I can tell you I've attended these, and you're not supposed to talk about what is in those briefings, and I certainly never have. I can tell you that they play a really important role. The in-person briefings play a really important role as opposed to a written summary, because of the interaction between individual members of Congress and the members of the intelligence community who are there. We get to ask questions. We can hear how, they're, beyond just what a report says, hear how they respond to certain things, certain questions. And I do agree that, people that are in these briefings need to keep the information confidential. But I also believe that the ODNI under Ratcliffe has unfortunately been politicized. And Ratcliffe is a staunch Trump acolyte, and we knew that going in when he was being confirmed. And it's unfortunate that he seems to be putting the political interests of the president ahead of the rights of the Congress, which go back many decades to know when and how foreign governments are interfering in our election. And really, it strikes the core of our Constitution, and it's just a betrayal of the Congress's right to know and the people's ultimate right to know through their congressional representatives. So I know that the Speaker and others have said that they will consider the full range of tools at our disposal if ODNI does not comply. I also saw just before we got on that Senator Rubio, who chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee, believes that the in-person briefings will continue, which is great news. Some more questions for you. Shelby asks, people react negatively to defunding. Is there a way to clarify the real intent? Well, it's very simple. I think defunding is, unfortunately, been out there as a real mischaracterization of what most of us want to see happen with regard to law enforcement. I think we want to see additional resources for things like mental health and public education, other services that will help law enforcement hopefully focus on doing their core jobs better. And that doesn't mean less funding for law enforcement. It shouldn't be a mutually exclusive proposition. But again, as Karen and I were talking about a little while ago, the media often gets sidetracked and likes to have that polarized partisan narrative, but couldn't be further from the truth. Here's another one. Donald in Oceanside. This is a great question. Where is the money for all this extra relief coming from? Higher taxes. Here's the reality of this, is we have had to borrow a massive amount of money this year. We see that our GDP or our deficit to GDP will be higher than 100% for the first time since World War II. And that's obviously not sustainable. What we also know from all of the economists and others that have looked at this is that we really have no good option right now. Either we help protect people's lives and livelihoods, we do everything we can to crush the virus. As we've said, we cannot have a healthy economy unless we have healthy people. So we do everything we can to ensure the health of our people. And we have to worry about the economic consequences downstream. But the economic consequences will be even more severe if we do nothing. And particularly with rates being what they are and the rate of borrowing costing the government less than it otherwise would. So that's what we've heard from the Fed chairman. That's what we've heard from the Congressional Budget Office. That's what we've heard from independent economic analysis. And that's what we'll continue to do. And so, look, at the end of the day, a $28 to $30 trillion debt is terrifying. That's not something any of us should ever aspire to. But let us be clear, the failure to deal with our deficits and our debt predated COVID. We, unfortunately, in 2016, the 2016 election, we heard this president, then the candidate, say that he would fully eliminate the national debt in 8 years. Eliminate the national debt in 8 years. And before the pandemic, he had added trillions to the national debt. The 2017 tax bill itself added anywhere from $1.3 to $2 trillion to the national debt. And this was a bill that Paul Ryan, you'll remember Paul Ryan at the time, said would pay for itself, and it did not pay for itself, far from it. So we're going to need, I believe, in future years, another Simpson Bowles style commission that will look at revenue and will look at spending and hopefully get things back on track so that our kids, our grandkids, and future generations will have the strong and prosperous America that we want to get back to. Bill in Vista asks, what is the current status of a second round of PPP money? Well, as I mentioned before, Bill, the PPP, we actually had 2 rounds already. We had the initial $320 billion allocation, then we had a $350 billion allocation. 138 is left. The challenge is a lot of small businesses do need that second round. I've heard that again and again from our small business community. And we're going to do everything we can to try to get that small business funding in this, I hope, 5th COVID relief package that we're looking to pass in September. That is certainly my intent, is to help the small businesses of our district. The good news is that over 20,000 PPP loans were distributed in the 49th district. to businesses that received over $613 million. So $613 million in federal aid went to those small businesses. So that's great. What's not so good is that, as you probably are aware, there were businesses that got the money that really didn't need it. And then there were other mom and pop small businesses that desperately needed the money that didn't get it. So my great hope is that for the future program, to the extent we have a second round, that we can do everything possible to have the level of transparency and oversight necessary to ensure that those businesses that need the money are the ones that really get the money. And here's another one. Harvey in Carlsbad, what are you and the Democratic Party doing to address the concerns of the moderate wing of the party? Well, I think that Will Rogers once said that he was not a member of an organized political party, he was a Democrat. And often I think that our big tent leads the media to talk about divisions within the party. Look, I think both Democratic and Republican politics have plenty of room for disagreement. I also, though, believe that on the core issues of the day, we've got a great deal of consensus as well. And I think having somebody at the top of the ticket who is a consensus builder, like Vice President Biden, I think is really important. And, moving forward, we're going to do everything we can, assuming that we have a different administration come January 2021, to try to build coalitions, not just among the Democratic caucus, but bipartisan coalitions. That's what I've tried to do in my first term, is to deliver results for our district and try to achieve common sense bipartisan solutions whenever possible. So I thank everybody for the questions. I think we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. I want to thank my dear friend, Representative Karen Bass, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, the author of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, for joining us. I hope you saw today what I always see, which is just a thoughtful and wonderful human being and a great colleague and a great friend. And I'm excited to have her back in the weeks and months ahead. One shout out to everybody. If you have not filled out your census, please fill out the census. We're talking literally just a few minutes to do that. I was seeing the reporting in the UT over the weekend that there were some parts in Oceanside and some other places throughout San Diego County where they had not had a particularly high level of people filling the census out. So I do hope that you do that and that you get your friends, your neighbors, and others. You encourage them to do the same. I know that this month is a critical month for getting the census completed. Also, as always, if you have any challenges with regard to federal resources, whether it's the veterans resources that we help with all the time, or anything to do with the federal government, any of these programs through the CARES Act, the COVID relief, immigration issues, Social Security issues, pretty much whatever you've got with regard to federal issues, we are here to help. We have a dedicated staff both in Oceanside as well as in Dana Point that would love to help you. And you can go to our website at mikelevin.house.gov and you can help us out anytime, or we can help you out hopefully anytime with whatever your federal needs are. I want to again encourage everybody. We're right now in this transition period where hopefully both of our counties are going to continue to get lower and lower levels of, from purple to red, from red to orange, orange to yellow on the governor's new blueprint. In order to hopefully get there, we've got to follow the recommendations of public health experts. That means social distancing. It means wearing a mask. It means adhering to those guidelines as set out by the California Department of Public Health and by the CDC. So until next time, thank you again for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you. Hope everyone has a great week. Take care.